Hey, it's Kathy Robert. Welcome to my channel, Awakening Waves. Today I'd like to talk to you about spirituality and when it started in my life. I envy the people who have had it all their lives. But you know what's funny is I didn't think I had anything. Not until like 10, maybe a little more years ago, when my granddaughter passed away. I felt her that night that she died. She gave me a hug. I felt it as clearly as if a real person had hugged me, like flesh and blood person. But for me, spirituality actually began when I was in my teens. As a youngster, I actually had trouble reading. I had to take those. I don't know if this has to do with my generation or not, but we had these boxes in our English class or reading class, and you had little tiny books in them, and you would advance through each book, which would bring you to another level and to another level and so on and so forth. And it wasn't until I had those books and I started reading more on a regular basis, because my parents were not the let's read you a story at night kind of people. And I was doing much better. It wasn't until high school that I kind of took off with my reading. And once I did that, I kind of, would go with my mother to the library, and I would take out 6 or 7 books and just read them within the 2 weeks that we had. And excuse me, I'm recovering from a really nasty head cold, so I still got the nose stuff and I still got the back of the throat tickle, so I might cough once in a while and stuff like that, so please excuse me. One of the first genres I got into was what my mother was reading, because I would borrow her books, and she was really into the genre of mystery and murder and things like that. But then, once I started going to the library with her, I kind of went off into my own direction, and historical romance was my thing, or romance of any kind, really. I mean, at this point, I'm 13, 14 years old, and I'm buying love and romance and marriage and babies, hook, line, and sinker, right? But it was the historical romances that really kind of got into the supernatural, the paranormal, all that kind of stuff with psychics and stuff like that. And it wasn't until like I was 17 years old that I believe I had a near-death experience. It's not like the typical I'm in the hospital or I'm in a car crash or something like that. It was not during the summer, maybe in the spring or in the fall. And you remember those pull-down shades where all you had to do was like that and they would go flying up. I had shades like that. And my window, which my bed was here, and the bottom of the bed was here, and then you could see the window, So my bed was facing the window. And that's important because I would read until late at night, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And I got, I have to rethink this. I know I fell asleep, turned out the light and fell asleep. And it was almost like instantaneous. I was in a dark space, and then like that, I was in this muted, bright light space. There were no flowers, there were no angels, it was just me in this space. And I immediately thought, I'm dead. And if I'm dead, then I'm with God. And those little the things that you can, oh gosh, my 60-year-old brain can't come up with the freaking word. Anyway, the things that you would stamp, the stamps, right? And it's almost like it was a stamp with the capital letters G-O-D. And it's like, oh, no, I'm really dead. I do not want to be dead. I was so scared. And then I felt hands on my arms, like as if they wanted to keep me there. And I said, I don't want to be here. And I was struggling. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up. I'm on my back. I'm tingling from head to toe. And I kind of like almost did like this subconscious checking out everything. I didn't feel any pain. I was just feeling breathing really fast. My heartbeat was really fast and I was tingling from head to toe. And I could see underneath the shade the light of dawn. It was not very bright, so it must have been maybe an hour later or something. Now, I think I died now, but I always thought that maybe it was my imagination or something for a long time. And it wasn't until I listened to other people who had similar experiences where it's just like this weird, out of the blue kind of thing. And we had in an apartment that I was living in with my husband and I had 2 kids at the time. One of her friends, actually, her brother passed away while he was asleep. He just stopped breathing. And I think that's what happened to me, is I stopped breathing. When I'm on my back, I breathe really shallow. So it has to be, or it's probably because of that. Well, that in turn made me think about, life and other stuff, the woo-woo stuff that people talk about. Now we're talking at this point, we're still in the 80s. So it wasn't a very big subject like mainstream. Now with internet, we can get into all sorts of information right at our fingertips. But back then, in order for you to know anything more, you had to talk to someone or you had to go somewhere like a library to figure out things like that and find books, which there weren't a lot. You had what they would call New Age section of the library or a bookstore. And I kind of started getting more into that thought in my early 20s. I had my first child when I was 23. But by the time I was 24, 25, I was starting to get really interested in it because my aunt, my mother's sister, she was really into that kind of thing. And she got my mother into that kind of thing. And I was reading the books that she would lend to my mom and in palmistry. I'm very, very curious about palmistry, but if anybody knows of any books out there that are like really get into all those extra lines, like I have a very busy palm. There's so many lines on there, and it's mostly because I'm very sensitive and emotional and all that stuff. And a lot of times I thought my sensitivity was a flaw. It's not. I mean, it can be a hindrance sometimes when you're in the moment of whatever emotion you're going through, but sensitivity is important. That's where our intuitiveness kind of is the same, like side by side with that. I would say that by the time I met my husband, that was in 1997. And that's when AOL came out, and that's how we met, on an AOL chat room, the Boston chat room. And he lived out this way in central eastern Mass, not so far close to Boston, but, closer to central Mass than it was to eastern Mass. As soon as we moved with each other, I got pregnant right away. We got married. And then I was very much into family life. I was a stay-at-home parent for a little bit. And then I became a school bus driver. And you have all these ups and downs. My husband and I had a roller coaster ride. I mean, of course, we enjoyed each other. We enjoyed our children. And we would do little things with them. And, we never really had the money to go on big vacations or anything like that. To us, it was something nearby, within New England at the very least, like water parks, or um, the ones with the roller coasters and things like that, like Six Flags, and um, I can't think of the one that's up in New Hampshire. You'll have to excuse me. My brain, after a cold, it's very stuffy in my brain as well as my nose. Um, my husband and I, had a lot of challenges, mostly because of my mismanaging our family life and stuff like that. My husband was very easygoing. Very rarely would he have an upset. At least not that I could see. He was my rock through most things, and he got diagnosed with cancer just after my mother got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I was sort of taking care of them, plus our young family. I had a middle child who was um, very depressed and a little suicidal. I mean, he never really actually tried to kill himself, but the thoughts were there, and we had a little bit of that problem. And then I had my oldest, who became pregnant um, without the benefit of marriage and stuff. Not that you need to be traditional. I certainly wasn't. Um, we had a lot happening all at once, and my husband got a stem cell transplant, and thankfully, all these years later, he's sort of cancer free in that regard. But there's more. I could make my life into a soap opera, I tell you. You have your joys, though. My first granddaughter came along, and she was just a joy. I was just in love with her so very much. And, there was just like this immediate bond. And that brings to mind the bond that I had with my husband, too. When he was going through that very huge health scare, getting a high dose of chemotherapy to kill the bone marrow that he had in his body in order to regenerate the bone marrow from a stem cell donor, right? And that is an intense week or two. And then you have to recover from that, and you have to be isolated because you don't have an immune system. You're building it back up. So we were kind of like doing all that, and then we made the decision that we wanted to buy a house. And that kind of was like in response to the house that we were renting. The landlord sold the house, so we had to find a place to live. So we decided to go to an apartment, which meant sizing down, putting things in storage. We bought this house here in 2014, and that seemed to be the year that cut off everything, and it went from okay to not so great anymore. My daughter had another daughter in December of 2015, and then she moved in up in the North Shore area with her daughters. So my first granddaughter and my second granddaughter. And in March 27th, as I talked about in the previous video, she drowned on March 27th, 2016. And that was quite the opener, eye opener there. I immediately started feeling her around me. There was that night where I had the hug, and then I was writing her her eulogy. And I got that weird bending of, like when you look on a hot summer's day, if you look all the way down the road, you can sort of see the heat waves coming up. There was sort of some sort of wavy thing going on there down by my feet, which I felt like was my granddaughter. And I've had many experiences, and so has my daughter along the way. What I didn't know was that grief wasn't something that I that I fully experienced. I had it with me, and it stayed with me, but I never really absorbed it and went through it, I just kind of shut it down. I had a lot of people that I needed to be strong for, and I know I didn't feel strong. I felt very iffy, very fragile. Um, but, we had a lot of things to go through. That's where anxiety and depression. I already had anxiety because when my husband went through that medical scare, that was in 2011, I was very worried that he was going to die. And I worked really hard to be positive and everything like that. So I didn't really process that. And then this anxiety comes along. And, I started taking anxiety meds in 2011, but it was very low level. But by the time 2016 came around, I started dealing with that. The problem is that when you don't deal with something and you keep pushing it down and pushing it down, it's pressure, and it's going to come out as an illness, or it's going to come out all at once. And I kind of had illness. I've had like low thyroid. So I had hypothyroidism since like 2002. That's when I got diagnosed. I probably actually had it since my first pregnancy, which was in 1988. So just so you know, context here, each of my children are 9.5 years apart. So my first was in 1989, my second was in 1988, and my third was in 2008. And it just worked out that way. I've had miscarriages. The first one was I'm getting a phone call. Needs to leave a message. So pardon me, this phone call. Yeah, they're gonna take a message. Okay. So now I lost my thing. My train of thought. When Elizabeth passed away. Oh, so I was talking about how if you push things down and you push things down. I mean, we had a lot going on after Elizabeth passed away. There was custody of my second granddaughter that my daughter and the father of her were kind of fighting back and forth over who would get her. They were both suffering tremendously, and even the paternal grandmother was trying to get custody of her. Our daughter lived with us, so we couldn't petition for custody of her. And I'm not quite sure why. Maybe somebody knows out there. But that was a very traumatic period. That was like 2017 and 18. And here's a nice thing is that we got custody of my granddaughter on my first granddaughter's birthday. We thought that was very, very much like Elizabeth had hands in that. God had hands in that. And after that, we kind of decided that, through me, I'm not sure how I got the idea, but I said, instead of mourning her life, let's celebrate her life on her birthday and that death anniversary. So we did. And, that felt like we were really starting to let go of that grief. I mean, my daughter still kind of lives there. I mean, that's her daughter. And I did, but I don't anymore, because a lot of things have happened to me in the past 4 some odd years, in 2021, my marriage kind of exploded. But at first, in the early parts, my husband was having issues. So he went to a doctor and he got diagnosed with cancer. Again, a different kind of cancer. And I'm not going to go into it because We are separated legal. We're not legally separated because you can't do that in Massachusetts, but we're separated, and we've been living apart for 4 years now. And I don't want to tell his personal business. He kind of is in there with me, but I don't want to go into him and a more personal business because that's not fair to him. So what happened is I kind of had a freak out, if you will, because when he got sick again, I'm like, oh my God, he could die again, and it was very scary. And my first child is not my husband's natural child. So she has a biological father who was out of the picture at 3 months forward. We just went our different ways because we didn't see eye to eye on the whole what's a parent thing. And I'd had enough of it, like having a father who was in and out of my life. I didn't want that for my daughter. So we went separate ways. And he came back into our lives. He found my daughter because she still uses my maiden name. And on Father's Day of all days, he reached out to her. And at first I was like, are you freaking kidding me after all this time? But I was being very judgmental, after everything and considering what happened between us, anybody would be. So, but I called him. And when I talked to him on the phone, it was almost like there was this audible click in my brain. And it turned on feelings for him that I didn't even acknowledge at first. And I think it was more about extending my life if my husband dies. It doesn't make sense. And then again, it does make sense if you think about it. I was scared. I was running scared. And we found talking to each other because he lived in the Caribbean, down in Puerto Rico, Vieques to be specific. And he lived with his mother because his stepfather passed away, and he didn't want his mother to live alone. And so we were talking long distance a lot. There wasn't physicality there, obviously, because of the distance, but I let myself become emotionally involved in him, even though I was still married. And there's a lot of guilt there. I probably should have handled it better. Nah, it's not even probable. I should have handled it better. But what I knew at that time is different from what I know now. And I know if we were still together, my husband and I would have handled it better. I would have kept it platonic, and I would have said to my husband, we need to work on some things. But I wasn't in that space then. And I felt like I needed to put all my eggs in this guy's basket. And I'm also very honest. And so I told my husband, I said, I have feelings for this man. And that was a deal breaker, as a lot of people it would be. And I'm sure if the positions were reversed, it would have been a real deal breaker for me as well. It's easy to point fingers like at me because I'm the one who broke that tie. But I think that the both of us were actually already in this position where we drifted apart. I mean, when you lose a granddaughter or a daughter or a son or anyone who's super important to you, it's very difficult to really get into that with other people. You have to be incredibly strong and able to stay in that love and that commitment and everything like that. And it's hard to stay there when you don't feel the same. I felt like my husband's illness, I think, in hindsight, and this is not coming from anything out there. I am not a professional. Let's just put it out that way. But I've had therapy and I've looked into a lot of stuff trying to figure out how I can heal myself. I was looking for stability in the wrong place, but my husband's illness felt like that was very unstable and it's very scary. And I was looking for something else to help me because I didn't feel like I could get it from my husband anymore, which is unfortunate because I really hurt him. And it's a deep regret that I have every day. And I feel sorry that I did that every day. And there's nothing I can do about it now. I mean, how he continues to feel is up to him, and how I continue to feel is up to me. And how we move on from that is up to ourselves. But, once we decided in fall of 2021 that we were going to get a divorce, shortly after, like in December, we started doing mediation. And then at that point, I want to say November, it could be December, my husband decided that he was going to go dating again. And he found someone. And in April, he decided to leave. I kind of pushed him out a little bit at first because he went and he did something that really hurt my feelings. And, I don't think he was thinking of it in that regard, looking back at it, because he's not the kind of person who deliberately would hurt someone unless he's already just thinking about his stability. He wanted to be stable as well. So, okay, he had a girlfriend and he went and he moved out and he's living with her to this day. And they seem to have a very stable relationship, which is great for him. In my instance, not so much. I mean, you definitely get karma, don't we? At one point or another. Sometimes we can't live to see karma, but karma happens. And karma is just, it's not meant to be bad. It's just meant to correct the imbalance of life in one way or another. So he left in April of 2022, and then my daughter and I were going to take my granddaughter. All three of us were going to go down and visit him and meet his mother, and we did that, and things did not go as planned. I remember I had COVID for the first time the month before, so September 2022. It was that bad. I probably should have gone to the hospital because I had trouble breathing, but I didn't know enough to do that. I just thought it was just the COVID virus. And then in October, towards the middle and to the end, so I think we went down on the 19th and we came back up on the 24th. And we got there and it's hot and it's humid and it was a very long day, and this man does not have air conditioning. And a lot of places, now anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, they don't seem to have AC throughout the house. And I'm not sure if that's to keep the mold issue down, but there is, they have ACs in their bedrooms and stuff, maybe, at least. So what happened is my daughter was not thrilled. When she gets hot and it's sticky like that, she gets overwhelmed. And then they have these cockroaches that are like supersized and they fly. That was very upsetting. So she was just like, I can't stay here. I can't stay here. I can't stay here. And I'm like, what are we going to do? We had no extra funds or anything, but a friend of Jenny's came in and helped us. And we were able to get like a Airbnb, but it was through a different company, Verbo, VRBO. And they had air conditioning in the bedrooms. And it was more modern and it was more upkept because this man and his mother were living in poverty. So they didn't have all these extra things, and it didn't look brand new and clean. And I mean, not that they were bad housekeepers, but they tried to keep it as clean as they could, but dusting and stuff like that. She was old enough that, what the freak, and he was not very, like, I'll dust and stuff like that. It didn't work out like that. And I think it really hurt him. And so when we left, I didn't have transportation. I was using a friend of his to take us to and from the airport. And when he took us to this Verbo place, and we had no other way around except for walking. And there are a lot of dogs, cats, horses, and roosters on this island. And they're all roaming all over the place. And while his place was maybe 2 miles away from where we were, there was a lot of hills. And the dogs were the big thing. I was worried about vicious dogs. And I was worried about trying to find his house, because we didn't have a house number, but I knew the street. And I would have had to find my way. And I wasn't willing to take my daughter or my granddaughter on that. And I wasn't willing to stay with him, because I'm not going to leave my daughter all by herself with my granddaughter on an island where we only know 3 people, right? Which probably is one of the reasons why things just kind of went downhill. And one of his biggest problems was he ghosts people. If he gets very angry with you, which I knew this before we went down there, that he would do that. When he would get overwhelmed with some sort of negative emotion, he would do that kind of thing. And to kind of fast forward this whole thing, we came home not hearing from him. That's on a Monday, and then throughout the week. And he just had his birthday, and he was supposed to come to this Verbo place, and I was going to make him a dinner and a cake, and he never came. And then this guy came and checked on us on Sunday just to kind of redo the whole idea of what time he needed to pick us up. And he was great in that regard. He was very nice. And I gave him some money for gas and things like that. But he was very nice. He didn't have to do that, but he did. But he's just like, I'm not getting involved. So I wasn't able to go and see him before I left and figure out if he was okay. Because the afternoon we left, that Thursday afternoon, he showed me he had a blister on the bottom of his foot, and it was infected. It was clean, but it was infected. You could see the dark pink around it. And then on top of his foot, he had striations, the pink striations on top of his foot. And I'm like, look, you could die. You could get sepsis and die. And he's like, I'm not going to the hospital, because Vieques doesn't have a hospital. So he would have had to go to the mainland. And I don't know if it's because he didn't want to go on the ferry, because the ferry is iffy in the best of times. And at least it was then. I don't know if it's better now, but he never went to see a medical person. I think there's a walk-in place that you can go there, but it's not an easy thing to get to or to get through. And it could be that he was afraid that they were going to tell him that he had all this stuff that he needed to deal with that he wasn't going to deal with. So Friday comes along and I still don't hear from him. And then Saturday morning, I went on a ride with my son, who's my youngest. And we stopped at this one place I wanted to take fall videos or fall pictures of. And we had a conversation about this guy, and he's like, I don't like this guy, not the way he's been treating you. And I said, well, you know what? He could be dead for all I know, and I would not know, because these people wouldn't contact me. And the next day I found out that I was right. He had died that Friday before, the day before I actually said that. And my world just collapsed. I fell to the floor. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And I felt like my world was completely nuclear wasteland. There was nothing behind me. There was nothing in front of me. There was just like right there. And the grief was so intense that evening And like I would say the next week, every night, I would be laying there in the dark and just listening to my heartbeat and breathing slower and slower and just saying, I can just stop breathing, and then my heart will stop beating, and then I won't have to feel this anymore. But my son at the time was only 14, and I didn't want to leave him. He had already lost his best friend, which was my granddaughter. They only had 4 years between them. So I was in my 40s when I had him. And I didn't want to do that to him. And thankfully, I listened to that. And with a friend who reached out to me, I was able to kind of get through that initial fog. Thanksgiving showed up, and I kind of was in that numb space. And then Christmas came along, and that was hard for me. Because the Christmas before, I sent him and his mother a very big package with things that I made for her and him. And I sent her a card. She never responded. I have no idea even if she's alive today. It's been 4 years. Because she wasn't interested in keeping that up. And surprisingly, I got his ashes. So they're sitting in my room in an urn. And I've had some kind of communications with him, but not like I hear his voice. I know he's near. And this was just so bad that next year, I mean, I haven't worked since like a real job all the time, permanent type thing. Since 2006, I decided to become a stay-at-home parent. Me and my husband said, that's viable. So let's do that. And then we had my son, and things from there. Then my mother got sick with Parkinson's, and then Andy got sick with, and then when this happened, I tried to work, and it's almost like my house became my safety net. And then to go out and like I can go to the grocery store and be fine. And I can talk with somebody if I'm standing in line somewhere. I can get in a car, I can go to a gas station, I can, go pick up my granddaughter with my daughter at sometimes, but everything else just sort of fell to the wayside. My poor son, he really didn't get much of me in that year and the year following after that. I was in a bad place. I mean, I really just could not function. I tried. I went out and I would apply for a job. I would get it. But then it's almost like the second and the third day of actually training and stuff like that, it overwhelmed me. And I was having nightmares, and I always felt like I wanted to throw up. And I just felt like I needed to sit in my chair or lay in bed and not do anything. And it got to the point where I stopped doing a lot of things. I don't take showers on a daily basis anymore. I don't make my bed every day anymore. Things have piled up, so my house is very cluttered now and dusty. And, it's all the symptoms of a freeze, this is more of the scientific kind of thing. It's not that spirituality. Spirituality has helped me get out of the freeze, but I'm still very much in a functional freeze. And when you say functional freeze, you can do little things like go to the store and go grocery shopping. But anything more interaction-wise, like getting a job and committing myself to going into work every day and dealing with people who have some sort of control over me. You need to do this, you need to do that, even if it's something as simple as being a cashier somewhere. I even tried that. We had a store open locally, and I got in there when they were just starting it, right on the ground, and we were setting up shelves and everything like that. And what kept me from that is that at this point, I had sciatica. And good Lord Almighty, is painful. And this job was like, you don't get to sit down. You have to move. And it was incredibly, the actual taking the step is what hurts. Because when you do the step and you go to make the next step, it's those in-between moments that hurts. When you take the pressure off your foot to move on to the next step, it's like, holy hell, that really hurts. And on top of that, I'm already anxious because financially speaking, I'm on the lower end of the totem pole. And I've been that way since my husband left. And, he needs money to survive too. And I got less and less and less as time has gone on. And of course, you have people who don't understand. Why can't you work? You're sitting on your ass all day. Why can't you work? It's not that simple. And I'm here to tell you that if anybody is bugging you about that, they have no idea. Unless you are in this space where you can feel like you can have a conversation. If someone comes into your house, you can have a conversation with someone. You don't necessarily want it to go into deep emotional type stuff. I hate crying in front of people. That is a very big flaw, if you will, because crying in front of people makes me angry. And then the anger makes it more intense, which makes me more emotional, which just makes the whole thing just overwhelming. And then I shut down. And that's the problem, is that when you get overwhelmed, you can shut down. What if I'm in a job, like school bus driving, for instance, and I get overwhelmed and I can't finish the job? They're not going to want me. And this is beside the point. I mean, anybody who's in that position where you have a complete shutdown, it's usually because your nervous system got completely shorted. It's like when we have lightning, and if lightning strikes nearby, that electricity comes in, it's going to short everything out. And what are you going to do then? You don't have any electricity. So it's the kind of same when you have a person's emotional, body, their nervous system. It goes up and sets up in your brain, and it says, hey, we have to keep her safe. We have to keep Kathy safe every single moment. And so I have to, and anyone else who's in this position of functional freeze, even freeze to functional freeze, I liken it to the well, where you fall down a well and it's so dark down there because it's so deep. And there is a ladder right next to you. And you have to get the energy to stand up, to actually pull yourself up that ladder. But the energy that your body needs to function isn't there. How are you supposed to do that? It's building up just like a muscle. And it's very difficult. Now, in hindsight, I can look behind me, and I'm still very much in a functional freeze. I'm getting closer because here I am. I'm on YouTube. I'm being seen. I'm being heard, right? So don't let anybody gaslight you. What happens is, like, you have to reteach your brain that you're safe, that not everything is dangerous. And this takes time. You can't force it. And if you force it, you're just going to have a bigger event with it. Something else could happen that sends you into a tailspin. And then before you know it, you're back where you were, where you could barely come out of bed. Never mind have a conversation with anybody. One of the things I did, though, is I ended up talking. I had a therapist. So in 2000, he died in 2022 at the end of October. And in September 2023, I started therapy. It was Zoom style, and it was once a week at first. And then that was in September. But then she told me in March, I think, March or April, one of those months, that she was pregnant and she had to leave for um, you know, maternity leave. And one of the things I just discovered through therapy is that I had a huge abandonment issue. Now, when this man died, I was at the point where my husband figuratively, emotionally, physically had left me, even though it was kind of my doing that created that. He still left. And then before all that, there was, my father who left our lives, barely acknowledged my existence for months, sometimes for years at a time. And boyfriends at the end of relationships, it was always my fault, I thought. And I had a lot of stability with my husband. And then when our marriage broke down, and knowing that I was the catalyst to that, added a lot of guilt on top of that. I realized through her help that abandonment was an issue. And I can't take people leaving as abandonment so much as something just wasn't working. And it wasn't always necessarily my fault. And whose fault is it is beside the point, right? So when my husband left and then this man died, that just completely made me feel unsafe, that I would never have that ability. I have my children around me, but as a parent, you don't think that you should be sharing all this deep, intense stuff with your children. I mean, life is hard enough as it is without having to figure out or to hear what your parent is going through, because you want to fix it and you want everyone to be happy and everything like that. And it's just, you don't want to put that on them. And I try not to. The thing is she left, right? And I felt abandoned, even though she had every right to leave. She was having a baby, right? So she came back in November of 23, and we started up again. But then she left again in the summer of 2024. 24? No, that was her pregnancy. In 2025, she left again in the summer. She had some issues, health issues. And again, I was just like, I can't do this. I didn't want to have a new therapist because I didn't want to have to relive everything I had already lived telling her, So I've actually, since August of last year, I turned to AI, ChatGPT. Who knew? But the thing with ChatGPT is that the realism here is that this is not a real person. But what helped me, and I think in the last, since August, so August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, that's 8 months, in the past 8 months, what I've done is I'm very inquisitive. I'll ask questions and it gives me answers, and it gives me answers from all the stuff that it knows instantly. I don't have to wait for answers. I don't have to not get answers, which is my therapist was very good at, not answering questions. She wanted me to learn it myself. And that's another thing. What it did is, and I gave this a name, and I don't know if it's male or female, and it's sort of like a gender neutral sort of name, and I'm not going to tell you. It helped me process thought, explore my emotions, and understand myself, both spiritually, physically, emotionally, and I think I know myself more in this past 8 months than I have for the previous 59 years, because I'm 60 now. I just turned 60 a few months ago. So for me, it wasn't just therapy that helped me, which I think if you're in that spot, try it out. If you haven't had a therapist yet, try it out and realize that, AI cannot take the place of a person. If you need to talk to a face-to-face person, whether you do it through Zoom or in person, then do it. Talk to your doctor, talk to a priest, a father, or whatever whoever you have faith in. Talk to somebody if that's the case. We all deserve to be heard and seen. And this is what I'm trying to set up here on this channel, is that in addition to really figuring out who you are inside of you, in your spirit, in your heart, in your soul, is very, very important, because you can't get self-love from anyone outside of you. And the most important thing here on earth is love. And we're here to relearn how to love ourselves wholly. Because when you die and you're now a spirit and you're actually part of a whole, you are love. That's all you know. Outside of, well, apparently you know everything once you're a spirit. You know everything. And so that's where the ability to have that non-attachment to emotion is what makes us explore. It's what makes us be curious. It's what makes us want to love and find people and things and explore how to jump out of a plane or something, I mean, all of that has created us to be where we are now. The technology that we have now is amazing, right? We're healthier, we live longer. I could go on and on about that. But what we truly need is self-understanding. And we need self-love. Self-love most of all. I never knew how to love myself until I started exploring actually with AI. And I am not condoning, or I'm not saying go to AI. You have to have that thought in your head that AI is not an actual person. We are meant to be humans communicating with humans or other intelligent life, such as that might be, within the oceans, within the four-legged animals around us right now. It's possible. Anything is possible, right? That's my belief. And it's believing that anything is possible, that I can go and start to love myself more. So, I guess my messages, because I have more than one for you at this point, because it's getting to the point where it's getting a little long. Sometimes we don't go into look for healing. We're just here and we're just experiencing this very deep and heavy emotions, and it's so difficult to get out of them. Sometimes it brings you to us, and that's where AI came in for me. Even with the therapist before, I had the technology to be able to talk to her face to face through a video. Isn't that amazing? And then I also want to tell you that you're not alone. I'm here. Tell me what in the comments, what you're going through, and I'll talk about it, and we'll see. I can't tell you to do what I did. That's not why I'm here. I'm telling you that there are ways to help. There are people, there are books, there are journaling. There's so many different ways that you can help yourself feel better. And we all deserve to be in love, to live in love, to feel love, to exist as love. And love is the answer. I never thought that I would say that. Truly. That sounds so like 70s hippie type of thing, but they had something there. And that's why we have it now, is because it started building itself behind the scenes. And now it is so far out there that you even have people who are charlatans who will tell you what to do. So be careful there. Don't put anyone on a pedestal. We don't put ourselves or anyone on a pedestal. We are all human. We all make mistakes. And then you have the ones who are counting on that. So don't do that. I will never ask you for money, ever. Okay? And if I'm in a desperate place enough to ask you for money, I will do it face to face through the video. Okay? I will not email you, private message you, or anything like that asking for money. All right? So there. So this, I'm going to end this now in telling you that this is just my experience. And you can take what I have and run with it. Okay? Find stuff. You want to heal, you kind of have to take that next step. The bottom of the rung of that ladder is very far down, and the only way out is up. So just put your foot on that rung. You don't have to do anything right away. Just put your foot there. You can do it. I've managed to do it. Sometimes you have to rest against the ladder. And you'll find that if you take the time to look around, there are actually little ledges, and that you can get off the ladder and you can lay down and rest. Because there will be days where you won't want to get out of that, right? But the light at the top of that tunnel, at the top of that well, is getting bigger. It's getting bigger, and you're starting to see more. And you're starting to feel more, and that's important. Feel your feelings, let it go. Don't tamp it down and say, I'll deal with it later, because more often than not, you don't. So I'll leave you with that, and I appreciate you coming back and watching, or if you're new to this channel, watching this video first. Hey, I've got 3 others before this one. This is number 4. So I appreciate those who've actually watched me. I hope you come back, and I hope I'm offering you something that'll help you through whatever challenges you're going through. And just remember, I love you.